Hi, I'm Bill Gross at Bill Gross Probate and social media. And the National Association of Realtor, NAR, Real Estate Commission settlement of the lawsuit, the drama continues. Did the settlement make things better? Spoiler alert, rarely does a combination of government officials and attorneys result in anything that's good for anybody but government officials, attorneys. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the market and make sure we understand where the economy is as far as real estate, and that'll help us understand the context. So in economics, there's two parts to an economy. There's supply and demand. Supply is the amount of homes available for sale. We use that inventory to track that. And demand is really driven by the interest rates, which drive buyers either into the market or out of the market. Let's take a look at the latest statistics. Last week, we had a jump. We've continued the rise since September 20th. When we're down right at 6%, now we are slightly over 7% rates. We've got up about 1% in the last 30 days or so. And last week they went about 10%, crossing over the 7% threshold. Now, you're not going to hear much news about that because the people who are the controllers of the economy want to support the current administration, not just Kamala Harris, but senators and congressmen and the Federal Reserve. They're all kind of in on the game, and the news is all kind of in on the same game. So there's not much news that the rates went over the key 7% factor, but it is a big deal. It is psychologically a big number for people, and I do think it will have some effects over the next 60, 90 days, though time will tell. So again, the continuing trend has been rates going up, not down, and now we've got about 1% in the last few months. Now, the inventory so far has not been negatively affected. If you take a look at homes for sale, the inventory continues to drop. We're at 627,000 units for sale. Now, traditionally, the inventory has dropped this time of year. You can see almost every year on record, inventory starts to drop in the winter seasons or late fall, early winter. But a little more dramatically this year. So inventory is still dropping relative to last year. And inventory is still the lowest it's ever been on record other than pandemic years and last year, which was kind of a pandemic adjustment year. So the pandemic period is either altered real estate forever or we still not worked our way out of that situation. As long as inventory remains low, real estate prices cannot crash. In fact, spoiler, I'll show you at the end that real estate prices are not crashing. In fact, they continue to rise. So as long as inventory is tight, yes, rates going up will reduce demand. Yes, bad government policies will cause less sales. But at the end of the day, prices won't drop unless there's more houses for sale than there are buyers in order to create that downward pressure. Now, in our local market in Los Angeles, where I live, I use Altos Research, does a great job of kind of summarizing the market with a market code, and they show a slight uptick last week from 36 to, they rate this week a 36.54, rounded up to a 37. So the market is basically flattened a bit as a slight seller's market continuing based on the inventory and prices and sales such. It's, it went up from, rounding 36 to 37, was the 36.44 to 36.54. I don't think the interest rate effect has really hit the market yet. We're still a few weeks away from seeing that. I anticipate at that time the market will soften a little bit more even at that time. Overall, we still have basically a slight seller's market, and that trend has continued through the whole pandemic period. Okay, so let's get into the issues of the NAR settlement. One of the stated reasons of the settlement, if you listen to the attorneys, you listen to the press, you listen to the Department of Justice, is that real estate commissions are too high. Now, how do they base that? Well, like all government officials, they always look at the countries they like and say, oh, well, in this country, the commissions are less, in that country, the commissions are less. They'll tell you that in those other countries, customers have to do more work, they have to hire attorneys, there's more risk, there's less fluidity in the real estate market. There's a lot of factors that go into this. But I think overall, one thing that's true is that in all businesses, prices are under attack. Even in high-end markets, traditionally, the luxury goods were exempt from price considerations. I saw a letter from the CEO of Poshmark, which is kind of like an Amazon for, I guess you would say, the wealthy, who buy high-end products together, or maybe people who are modest but want to buy one high-end product. But Poshmark is a service that a lot of your influencers use, and NBA players and NFL players' wives and such. And basically what they're saying is they had to reduce their fees because of competitive market pressures. And it just caught my attention just to note that just because commissions are up or down, it's not because of fooling people, getting away with it. There's always competitive pressures in an efficient market. And so realtors are no different than that. And the fact that commissions for realtors go up or down won't necessarily be because of the changes in the NAR settlement. Now, real estate transactions, the number of sales are down 30%. The real estate industry is basically in a depression. Any industry that loses 30% of its sales activity would be in a depression. If car sales are down 30%, we'd say it's in a depression. It's just that the government, the Department of Justice, and these monopolies, Facebook, Google, Zillow, Redfin, and then Compass, their ally, are all trying to destroy the realtor companies. And as such, we don't talk about it that way. But the reality is, when you have a drop of 30% of your business, it's true that you will see it's dropped by 30%. It's basically a depression. So what happens as a result? Well, one thing that used to happen was companies would be competitive and they would offer more services for realtors. So you would change from one company to another when the market was competitive. And Keller Williams came in and disrupted the market back in the 90s period, maybe 2000. They offered more value to customers. Real estate agents left the traditional Century 21s, Coldwell Bankers, Remaxes, and went to Keller Williams to get more service that they could give to their customers. And that's a good thing. I think when there's healthy competition, you see changes in competition going on. What's bad going on right now is because of the lawsuits, so many companies are investing money in legal fees and trying to find the way out of being sued out of existence by the government and these attorneys, that they can't give more value to customers. In many cases, it's causing real estate agents not to change companies. And here's an article from Housing Wire that we had the lowest amount of agent turnover in 8 years. Why? Because there's no new company offering a dramatically different program since COVID, since the lawsuit. Nobody's putting capital into the industry of representing buyers and sellers. And part of that is because you have these big monopolies attacking companies. And we'll talk a little bit about some examples of that. So overall, I would say that that effect is negative. Another one is that we're going to end up with a monopoly of who's really doing business. So for example, one of the largest real estate companies, if not the largest independent, is Compass. And they're one of those Wall Street darling companies where investors put money in and everybody gets rich, but the taxpayers, they never pay taxes. It's kind of like Zillow and Redfin. They are worth billions and they put other companies out of business to pay taxes, but they don't. Compass is one that is worth $3 billion and pays zero federal income tax, and they're competing and disrupting, to use their fancy language, other companies that do in fact pay taxes. So what's their effect? How do they benefit from this crippling lawsuit activity? Well, here's the CEO kind of bragging that he wants Compass to be the hub for real estate listings, meaning rather than the multiple listing service, which was all the local realtors cooperating by definition and all putting all their listings in the market to work with each other and give sellers maximum exposure. The CEO of basically an online monopoly, Compass, is saying, oh, well, no, we'll be the new MLS. We'll have all the listings and sellers will benefit from that. Now, of course, one company controlling the market is only good for that company and is always bad for all of the marketplace. And so this is, I don't know if Robert Refkin, he seems like a nice guy. Did he miss basic economics in his college education or along the way? I don't know. But monopolies always work to the detriment of consumers. The other thing, but of course, he's not talking to consumers. They're not his customers. His customers, he's talking to are financial analysts who buy his stock and prop it up and make money on the stock while the company is not making any money, therefore they don't pay any federal taxes. The whole thing is just like this big money scam where everybody gets rich, but the US taxpayer gets basically screwed providing services to these people. The other thing about it is when he says that they want to be the hub for all of it, they also talk about having listings that are off market, meaning they're, if you look at the quote line, say sellers want their homes to be protected from the risk of MLS exposure. Meaning he's saying sellers would rather have my company list the house and we'll only tell our agents rather than the other 95% of agents in the marketplace. Now think about that. How could it possibly be good to hide the listing from the vast majority of agents and keep the listing available only to those in one company that overall has about maybe 5% market share? And that's what it doesn't. And in a normal world, that statement would be laughed out of existence. But again, he's not talking to consumers. He's not talking to sellers or buyers or prospective real estate agents. He's talking to financial analysts that buy his stock, prop it up, allow him to make millions of dollars, allow his company to build value of billions of dollars. And meanwhile, the one thing that nobody does in the whole scheme of that is pays any federal taxes. How can that continue in the long run? Obviously, it's not a sustainable program. The NAR settlement, in fact, is so bad that the one expert on the subject who wrote the most comprehensive review on the proposed settlement, she's a professor of law at University of Buffalo, New York, Tanya Monistar, and I had that report on a previous episode of the show. And she actually, after writing that report, and nobody covered it. Nobody in the press wants to cover the objections. They all want to pretend it's great because all of the real estate news is either in bed with Zillow or Redfin, who want to destroy realtors, Compass, who wants to be the only realtors, or Google and Facebook. So the news won't ever report that the settlement is bad. Here's the only, I would think, academic analysis of it, saying it's bad. Then she went further because nobody picked up on it. She actually filed an objection in the lawsuit. She filed a 132-page objection in the lawsuit saying the settlement is the worst of all possible worlds. In fact, there's a quote here, I think it's something I actually said exactly, which is, the settlement makes sense, but only on paper. It's an example of something concocted by lawyers without a full appreciation of how this would play out in the real world. And you have to remember, what the NAR settlement does is you have the Department of Justice, some hack attorney who never sold a house or bought a house, is now settling and pushing pressure on companies to accept a settlement. And you have the antitrust attorney who all he wants to do is get paid his share of $1 billion. So he's looking at getting, I don't know, $100 million or $50 million, some ridiculous life-changing amount of money. He's charging, I think, $2,000 an hour for his work. But what nobody's doing is looking out for the buyers and sellers of real estate. There's nobody interested in that. The judge doesn't care. He's just pushing the case along. Who knows what his motivation is? The jury probably doesn't know what they're doing. They're the same as one jury in St. Louis, Missouri. And then you have this attorney, the class action attorney, and then the Department of Justice attorneys who know nothing about real estate and don't care about it, rewriting all the laws of real estate. How can that work well? How can our economy continue to function with such chaos? And the answer is it won't. It's going to hurt a lot of people. It's going to hurt people who are going to take advantage of. And in the long run, I just don't see it lasting. I don't see this settlement going into effect. Now, I will say this. If the election, which is in a few days, goes Republican, I do think the Department of Justice will have to stop their energy. If they can't conclude things by January, they'll have to stop. And that might change the whole settlement. If the Democrats win, then I will say settlement's going to be enacted into practice. And I think it's going to disrupt real estate for a long time. And there'll be more harms coming forward. Okay, in other news in the real estate, I've covered in the past the horrible example of UCLA and others who basically have, I think, paid off certain Veterans Administration officials in order to use land donated for veterans housing for their own purposes. UCLA has decided that it was much more important, I've covered this before, to build the baseball stadium for their baseball team rather than housing for homeless veterans. So when we talk about homeless, and you say, well, how many of them are veterans? And the homeless industry always says how many there are. And when you drive through the freeways of LA, you see all the time, I'm a veteran, I don't know if they are or not. UCLA thinks it's more important to have their baseball stadium, which is like a mini, and practice field, don't forget, and parking lot for people to come see the baseball stadium, than homeless. And so they got sued after 8 years of fighting it and appealing. Finally, the judge said, I'm tired of your appeals. You need to start moving on this. And they're now forcing UCLA to at least build housing on the parking lot. And I find that funny because we have homelessness that's allowed on every street in Los Angeles now. Every underpass, major boulevards have homelessness on the streets. All that's okay, we can't take those down. But somehow the city is hesitant to build real housing for veterans on land that's owned by the Veterans Administration for veterans. That we can't do. We can give illegal immigrants a free pass to live in tents and do drug deals and prostitution and all kinds of, I don't know, marketing of children across our country. We can do that. But we were hesitant, and UCLA has to be forced to build housing on the parking lot, not even the baseball field. The parking lot, they had to fight and be told by a judge that that's not enough. Look, I've always hated UCLA my whole adult life. There's nothing new for me, but this is just a whole nother level, I think, of disgrace. Interesting piece of news for those of you who invest in real estate. For the longest time, LLCs were used for liability protection, which is great. Various corporations for tax reasons, which is great. But they're also used for privacy. You can have an LLC, and then the tenants or other parties wouldn't know who actually owned the property. That's going away. There was a new law that was just passed, and this is a hat tip to Bornstein Law. Daniel Bornstein's been on my channel, great attorney specializing in eviction laws in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Corporate Transparency Act makes it harder for criminals to use entities, which is good. We don't want criminals to hide behind LLCs. We don't want money laundering behind LLCs. But one of the unintended consequences of that is that now when you form a corporation or entity or LLC, you need to file within 30 days a statement of ownership showing who you are. Now, I imagine you can have a nest of various LLCs, and I'm not really sure how all that would work. But it's going to get harder to hide. It's going to be at some point public record ownership in a particular entity. And there'll be more sophisticated tools used than just merely an LLC. So something kind of a heads up on if you're buying one. Not to say that it isn't good to have a corporation, not to say it's not good to have an LLC. I'm just saying you need to be aware of the fact that in all likelihood, the simple LLC format to hide your privacy isn't going to work. Speaking of new laws, here in Los Angeles, in its never-ending quest to destroy the housing market, the LA City Council voted 11-0 to prohibit landlords from evicting tenants in order to remodel units. It used to be that if you had units and wanted to do major improvements, major renovation, make them nicer, upgrade them. You have a 1920s or 30s apartment building, and you would bring up to current market standards, maybe add some units, maybe put parking in, and who knows, whatever amenities you want to add. You used to evict tenants while you did that process, and then you would bring it back to market as a nice unit. Can't do that anymore. And so our city council voted 11-0 to take that off the table. Now, it's not done yet. They basically assigned this to attorneys to write the actual law, but they all want to do it. And I just want to read a quote from my council member, the airhead Katie Yaroslavsky. Now, this is a woman who got a job because her father was a council member, and she purposely uses her father, her maiden name rather than her married name, so she can ride on the coattails of her father. She's never really done anything for anybody but get elected. She said, my policy, so it's hers, my policy will ensure that a tenant has the ability to maintain tenancy, keep paying rent, and stay in there, and I'll insert the words dilapidated apartment. Because what's going to happen is, if you can't evict them in order to upgrade the apartment, you're not going to upgrade the apartment. And if you drive around LA, one thing you notice here versus other cities is we have so many older housing. Like I was just in Miami Beach. It was amazing to me in the Miami Beach area near the convention center how many older apartment buildings were renovated. And on the outside, they had the Art Deco look. The one I stayed on the inside was modern. It was very nice. They had modern electricity, modern internet access, modern bathroom, modern amenities. And so that only comes when you can, that was a hotel, but there are apartments in the area, the same thing. When you can kick out the tenants paying very low rent, you invest in your property and you charge a higher price. But see, that's in capitalism where you own the property. Now, Los Angeles, basically, I would say socialist council members like Katie Yaroslavsky look at the housing stock as their property. It's her policy. They don't understand that the person paid, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million for the apartment building, and it's their property. If you have, it's like saying, you can't go wash your car and stop driving in a taxi. You have to keep driving the same car over and over again because people want to be in your taxi and it'll be cheaper. Well, at the end of the day, in the long run, when you have city council members who know nothing about real estate making these aggressive policies, you end up with worse and worse policies. That sounds great, and I'm sure she's tested it out, and for her constituency, which is basically government officials, it sounds great. She'll get reelected. What it doesn't do is help the housing situation in Los Angeles. In fact, the opposite. Like everything that City of Los Angeles has done, it's only going to make things worse. Now, despite that, nationally, the good news is, nationally, Housing prices last year went up 4.2%. So when you have inflation of probably 3.5%, maybe 4%, housing prices have at least stayed with inflation. Housing is a great hedge against inflation. If you buy a house with only 10% down payment, your investment even beats inflation, perhaps, because if you're paying the interest, the housing price of the whole house goes up, not just the equity part that you put in. So really, housing continues to show as a great long-term hedge against inflation. It continues to be a great way to defer taxes and a great way for savings on building wealth. So at the end of the day, we want to stay in housing, maybe not in Los Angeles. I'm not sure how you would possibly invest in apartment units in Los Angeles, knowing that the city really just wants to take your property and give it to who they want to give it to and take it out of your hands. So at the end of the day, what do you see in the market? Give me your comments, put your likes, your unlikes, subscribe if you like this. Give me your comments or reach out to me. I'm at Bill Gross Probate, or BillGrossProbate.com has all my contact information. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.